Congratulations. You just time traveled to 1875 America, bad news? Your chances of surviving even 24 hours just dropped to almost zero from the moment you open your eyes. Everything around you is either trying to poison you, freeze you, or worse. Let's see if you'd make it to dinner. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another journey through history. If you're new here, I'm your guide through the fascinating and often terrifying realities of the past. And if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. It helps more than you know. I'm always curious where you all are listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's amazing to think people all over the world are drifting off to these stories. Now find that comfortable spot, take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into whatever you're resting on tonight. We're stepping back 150 years to experience life as an average American family in 1875. Trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll have a whole new appreciation for that warm bed you're lying in. Your eyes flutter open in the pre-dawn darkness of February 15th, 1875. But this isn't your comfortable modern bedroom. You're lying on a straw mattress that crackles with every movement, covered by heavy wool blankets that smell of wood smoke and human occupation. The air is so cold you can see your breath forming small clouds in the dim light filtering through a single, frost-covered window. The first sensation that hits you isn't sight or sound. It's the bone-deep cold. The fire in the corner fireplace died sometime during the night, and the cabin's thin wooden walls do little to keep out the harsh Nebraska winter. The temperature inside is probably around 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, it's well below zero. You're sharing this small, one-room cabin with your spouse and 3 children, ages 4, 7, and 9. Everyone sleeps in the same room because it's the only room you have, and more importantly, it's the only space you can hope to keep marginally warm during the brutal prairie winter. The cabin itself is barely 16 by 20 feet, smaller than most modern living rooms. The walls are rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and bits of cloth to keep out the wind. The floor is packed earth covered with scattered rugs made from old clothing and grain sacks. There's no insulation, no central heating, no running water, and certainly no electricity as you force yourself to sit up. Every joint in your body protests. You're only 35 years old, but you feel ancient. Years of hard physical labor, poor nutrition, and constant exposure to harsh weather have aged you beyond your years. Your hands are cracked and scarred from work, your back aches constantly, and you've lost several teeth already. Dental care being essentially non-existent on the prairie. The children are still sleeping, huddled together under shared blankets for warmth. Your 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, has been fighting a persistent cough for weeks now. In 1875, any illness was cause for concern, as medical knowledge was limited and treatments were often ineffective. Your 4-year-old son, Tommy, has been feeling unwell with stomach troubles for the past week. He's been less energetic than usual and hasn't been eating well. Your 7-year-old Mary seems to be the healthiest of the children at the moment, though you know how quickly that could change in frontier conditions. Your spouse, let's call her Elizabeth, stirs beside you as you rise. Even in sleep, her face shows the strain of frontier life. She's only 32, but her hair is already streaked with gray. Her hands are as rough as yours from constant work, and she moves with the careful movements of someone whose body has been pushed beyond its limits too many times. The first task of every day is rebuilding the fire. Without it, you'll all be in serious danger within hours. You reach for the tinderbox beside the bed, a small metal container holding flint, steel, and char cloth. Starting a fire in 1875 requires skill, patience, and dry materials. There are no matches. No lighters, no electric ignition, just you, some basic tools, and hopefully enough dry kindling to coax flames back to life. You strike the flint against the steel, sending sparks onto the char cloth. It takes several tries in the cold air. But finally, a small ember glows. You carefully transfer this to a nest of dry grass and wood shavings, blowing gently to encourage the flame. Too little air and it dies, too much and you blow it out. It's a delicate balance that frontier families master out of necessity. Finally, blessed warmth begins to spread from the corner fireplace. But you know this reprieve is temporary. The small pile of split logs beside the hearth represents maybe 6 hours of heat. Then you'll need to venture outside into the brutal cold to gather more wood, assuming you can find any dry enough to burn. As the fire catches hold, you notice something that would concern modern parents. The cabin air carries smoke that doesn't fully escape through the primitive chimney. Everyone in the family has developed a persistent minor cough from constantly breathing this smoky air. But the alternative, no fire, means potential hypothermia. So you accept the trade-off as necessary for survival. Elizabeth rises and immediately begins her morning routine. There's no time for stretching, no leisurely wake-up period, no checking phones or planning the day. Survival requires immediate action. She needs to prepare breakfast, tend to the children, check on the animals, and begin the endless cycle of tasks that keep the family functioning for another day. But first, nature calls. And this is where the harsh reality of 1875 life becomes immediately apparent. There's no bathroom in the cabin. There's barely room for the beds and fireplace. Instead, there's a wooden bucket in the corner, euphemistically called a chamber pot. The entire family shares this single receptacle for nighttime needs. The smell is challenging, to put it mildly. In winter, when it's difficult to empty the bucket frequently due to weather conditions, the odor becomes a constant presence in your living space. There's no toilet paper. Instead, you use corn cobs, old rags, or torn pieces of newspaper if you're lucky enough to have any. The bucket will need to be emptied sometime today, which means carrying its contents out into the snow and disposing of it in a pit dug behind the cabin. But that's assuming you can get outside at all. Looking through the small window, you can see that yesterday's snowstorm has drifted against the cabin door. There's probably 3 feet of snow blocking your exit. This means your first task of the day is digging your way out of your own home. You pull on your clothes, the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before and will wear tomorrow. Washing clothes in winter is nearly impossible, requiring melting snow for water and finding a way to dry wet fabric in sub-zero temperatures. Most frontier families own only 2 or 3 sets of clothing, and wash them perhaps once a month if conditions permit. Your clothes consist of long wool underwear, wool pants, a flannel shirt, wool socks, if they don't have too many holes, and boots made from whatever leather you could obtain. Everything is patched and repatched. Nothing matches. And comfort is a secondary consideration to warmth and durability. Elizabeth is already starting breakfast, which means putting a pot of water over the fire to begin making cornmeal mush. The family's diet is repetitive and nutritionally limited. Cornmeal, beans, salt pork, and occasional wild game make up 90% of your meals. There are no fresh vegetables in winter. No fruit except perhaps some dried apples if last year's harvest was good. No dairy products unless you own a cow, which you don't. The children wake up slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth of their shared blankets. Tommy seems listless and complains that his stomach hurts. Sarah's cough sounds congested this morning. Mary appears more energetic but mentions that she doesn't feel quite right either. As the family gathers around the small wooden table for breakfast, you realize this scene would surprise modern Americans. 3 children sharing simple food, drinking water that tastes of whatever minerals were in the soil where you dug your well, wearing clothes that would be considered inadequate today, living in a space smaller than many modern walk-in closets. But this is life for the average American family in 1875. No electricity, no running water, no central heating, no refrigeration, no modern medicine, no transportation faster than a horse, no communication faster than a letter, and no guarantee that any of you will easily overcome the challenges that winter might bring. The cornmeal mush is filling but not particularly exciting nutritionally. It lacks many of the vitamins and minerals needed for optimal health, especially for growing children. Nutritional deficiencies are common during the long winter months without fresh produce. Various health issues affect many frontier families who don't get adequate nutrition. After breakfast, the real work of the day begins. And the first challenge is simply getting outside. You take the wooden shovel from beside the door and begin the process of digging through the snowdrift that's accumulated against the cabin during the night's storm. The cold hits you like a physical blow when you open the door. The temperature is probably 20 below 0 Fahrenheit. With a wind that cuts through your wool clothing like it's paper, your breath instantly freezes in the air, forming ice crystals that cling to your beard and mustache. Within minutes, your fingers and toes begin to go numb despite your gloves and boots. This is dangerous cold, the kind that can cause frostbite in minutes and create serious health problems within hours if you're not careful. But you don't have a choice. The animals need to be fed and watered, firewood needs to be gathered, and the daily tasks of survival can't wait for warmer weather. You dig through the snow, creating a narrow path from your door to the small barn where you keep your 2 horses. 1 cow and handful of chickens. Each shovelful of snow weighs more than you expect, and within minutes you're breathing hard despite the cold air. The physical exertion creates a paradox. You need to move to stay warm, but moving makes you sweat, and sweat in sub-zero temperatures can be problematic. The barn, when you finally reach it, is only slightly warmer than outside. The animal's breath creates clouds of vapor in the frigid air. The water in their trough has frozen solid overnight, a thick sheet of ice that you'll need to break with an axe before they can drink. Your horses, sturdy draft animals bred for work rather than speed, stand huddled together for warmth. Their coats are thick with winter hair, but even they struggle in this cold. Ice has formed around their nostrils from their breath, and they stamp their feet constantly to maintain circulation. The cow presents a particular challenge. She needs to be milked twice a day, regardless of weather, or she'll develop health problems. But milking requires removing your gloves, and unprotected hands in 20 below weather quickly become dangerously cold. You'll need to work fast, milking directly into a pail that you'll carry back to the cabin before the milk begins to freeze. The chickens are struggling significantly. Several of your original dozen appear weak and sluggish, huddled together in a corner of the barn with their feathers fluffed out in an attempt to trap warm air. They've stopped laying eggs entirely, their bodies conserving energy for basic survival rather than reproduction. Feeding the animals requires carrying hay from the small loft above the barn stalls. This hay represents your animal's lifeline through the winter. You cut and dried it last summer, working 18-hour days in the prairie heat to gather enough feed to last until spring. If you miscalculated, if the winter runs longer than expected, if the hay spoils or runs out, your animals could face serious problems. And if your animals don't survive, your family faces major challenges. The horses are your only means of transportation and your primary source of labor for working the fields. The cow provides milk, butter, and cheese, crucial sources of protein and fat. The chickens, when they're laying, provide eggs and occasional meat. The health of these animals directly affects your family's survival prospects. After feeding and watering the animals, a process that takes nearly 2 hours in the brutal cold, you face the next challenge: gathering firewood. The pile of split logs inside the cabin will last maybe until midday. Then you'll need more fuel or risk letting your family get dangerously cold. But finding burnable wood in the middle of a Nebraska winter is increasingly difficult. You've already harvested most of the easily accessible dead branches and fallen trees within walking distance of your cabin. Now you'll need to venture further from home, wading through snowdrifts that come up to your chest, looking for anything that will burn effectively. Prairie settlers quickly learn that not all wood burns equally. Green wood produces more smoke than heat. Wet wood refuses to catch fire at all. Rotted wood burns fast but provides little warmth. You need dry, seasoned hardwood, oak, ash, or maple if you can find it. But such premium firewood is becoming increasingly scarce as more settlers move into the area and compete for the same limited resources. Today's search takes you nearly half a mile from your cabin, following a creek bed where you hope to find fallen cottonwood trees. The snow is deep and the cold is brutal your feet. Despite thick wool socks and leather boots, begin to lose feeling within the first few hundred yards. You find a fallen branch about 6 inches in diameter. Not ideal, but it will have to do. Breaking it into manageable pieces requires an axe, which means removing your gloves despite the cold. The metal axe handle feels extremely cold against your bare hands, but you need the grip to work safely. Each swing of the axe sends shock waves through your cold, stiffened muscles. Your breath comes in ragged puffs that freeze instantly in the air. Despite the sub-zero temperature, you begin to work up a sweat from the physical exertion, creating another challenging situation. Wet clothes in extreme cold can be dangerous. It takes 45 minutes to reduce the branch to armloads of manageable pieces. Then comes the challenge of carrying it all back to the cabin. The wood is heavy, awkward, and you can only carry so much at a time. This means multiple trips through the deep snow, each journey sapping more of your energy and exposing you longer to the dangerous cold. By the time you return to the cabin with the first load of firewood, you've been outside for nearly 4 hours. Your hands show signs of cold injury. They're white and have lost sensation. Your feet feel completely numb. Ice has formed in your beard and mustache. and your face feels stiff and unresponsive. Elizabeth greets you at the door with worried eyes. She's been tending the fire and watching it burn lower while you were gone. The children are showing more signs of illness. Tommy seems more listless and isn't interested in eating. Sarah's cough has worsened overnight. Mary is complaining of feeling tired and achy. The root cellar is another challenge entirely. It's a small dugout behind the cabin where you store what food you have. Sacks of cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, and whatever vegetables you managed to preserve from last summer's garden. But reaching it requires digging through more snow, and the wooden door is probably frozen shut. Inside the root cellar, the temperature hovers just above freezing, cold enough to preserve food, but warm enough to prevent it from freezing solid. The space is barely large enough for one person to stand up in, and it's filled with the earthy smell of root vegetables and the sharp odor of preserving salt. Your food supplies are getting concerningly low. The sack of cornmeal that seemed so large in October now looks alarmingly small. The dried beans are being consumed faster than expected, probably because the children need more calories to stay warm in the brutal cold. The salt pork, your primary source of meat and fat, might last another 2 weeks if you ration carefully. This is the constant concern of frontier life, the mathematics of survival. How much food do you have? How long will it last? What happens if winter runs longer than expected? What if someone gets sick and can't work? What if the animals face problems? Every calculation leads to the same potential concern: running out of essential supplies. You carry what food you can back to the cabin, but even this simple task is complicated by the cold and snow. The burlap sacks are awkward to carry, and dropping them would mean losing precious food to the snow. Your numb fingers struggle to maintain a grip, and you move carefully to avoid slipping on the icy path. Back inside the cabin, Elizabeth is trying to encourage Tommy to drink some warm water. The little boy is clearly not feeling well. His cheeks are flushed, his eyes look tired, and he keeps asking for his mother, even though she's sitting right beside him. In 1875, childhood illness was a serious concern. Without modern diagnostic tools or medical knowledge, parents could only observe symptoms and hope for recovery. Many families dealt with various childhood ailments that today would be easily manageable with proper medical care. Sarah, the 9-year-old, is trying to help with her siblings despite not feeling well herself. Her cough seems to be getting worse, and you notice she appears to have lost some weight recently. Her clothes hang a bit loose on her small frame. But she's old enough to understand the family's situation, and she tries to be helpful even when she doesn't feel her best. Mary, the 7-year-old, alternates between trying to play and complaining about various aches and pains. Children in 1875 don't have toys as we understand them. Perhaps a corn-husk doll or a wooden toy whittled by their father. Entertainment consists mainly of helping with chores, listening to stories, or playing simple games that require no equipment. The cabin itself reflects the practical realities of frontier life. The walls are decorated with nothing but useful items: tools, spare clothes, cooking equipment. There are no paintings, no photographs, no decorative objects of any kind. Every item in the cabin serves a survival function. The furniture is crude and handmade. The table is rough planks supported by wooden legs. The chairs are simple stools or benches. The beds are wooden frames supporting straw mattresses. There are no closets, no dressers, no storage space except for wooden pegs driven into the log walls. Privacy is essentially non-existent. The entire family lives, sleeps, eats, and goes about their personal business in the same small space. There's no separate bedroom for parents, no private space for anyone. Children witness every aspect of adult life, and adults have no escape from the constant presence of children. The psychological pressure of this arrangement is considerable. Adults need privacy, time alone, space to process the stress of frontier survival. But frontier cabins offer none of these things. Families live in constant, enforced intimacy that would be considered challenging by modern standards. As the morning progresses, you realize that today's challenges are just beginning. The animals need to be fed again in the afternoon. More firewood needs to be gathered before dark. The chamber pot needs to be emptied. Water needs to be hauled from the well, assuming the well hasn't frozen solid. And all of this assumes nothing goes wrong. What if one of the horses gets injured? What if the cow stops producing milk? What if the cabin roof starts leaking? What if you get hurt and can't work? What if the food runs out before spring? These aren't hypothetical concerns. They're daily realities for frontier families. Equipment problems, health issues, weather challenges, or resource shortages can quickly transform a difficult situation into a dangerous one. There's no safety net, no 911 to call, no neighbors close enough to help in an emergency. The nearest doctor is probably 50 miles away, assuming there is one at all. Even if you could reach a doctor. Medical care in 1875 is primitive and often limited in effectiveness. Many treatments are based on incomplete understanding of disease and healing processes. Women's health care is particularly limited and concerning. Pregnancy and childbirth carry significant risks. Many women face complications during childbirth or afterward. Family planning options are essentially non-existent. So families tend to be large, which creates additional challenges for food and warmth during harsh winters. Elizabeth has already given birth to 5 children, though your family currently has 3. The challenges of repeated pregnancies and childbirths have taken a toll on her health, as was common for women of this era. But children also represent additional people to feed, clothe, and protect. The balance between children as helpers and children as dependents is constantly on parents' minds. More children mean more assistance with work, but also more food needed, more risk during difficult times, more potential for worry when illness strikes. As the day continues, you begin to understand why life expectancy in 1875 America is significantly lower than today. It's not just the dramatic incidents, the accidents, diseases, and disasters. It's the constant grinding stress of survival that wears down the human body and spirit. Your body aches constantly from hard physical labor. Your hands are permanently cracked and scarred from work. Your back has been injured multiple times from lifting heavy objects and now causes ongoing discomfort. Your dental health is poor from limited nutrition and lack of dental care. Your mind is under constant stress from the mathematics of survival. How much food is left? How long will the firewood last? Are the children getting sicker? What happens if the weather gets worse? The mental burden of keeping a family alive with primitive tools and limited resources is enormous. Sleep, when you can get it, is often interrupted. The cabin is never truly warm, so you wake up multiple times each night to tend the fire. The children cough and are restless in their sleep. Outside sounds, wind, animals, unknown noises wake you with worry about potential problems. There's no time for leisure, no energy for hobbies, no mental space for contemplation or self-improvement. Every waking hour is devoted to the immediate tasks of survival. Reading is rare and requires precious candles or oil for lighting. Social visits are limited by weather and distance. The isolation is profound and psychologically challenging. Your nearest neighbors are 3 miles away, close by frontier standards, but impossibly far when traveling requires walking through snowdrifts in sub-zero weather. You might not see another adult outside your family for weeks or months at a time. News from the outside world arrives sporadically and often months late. You might hear about national events through a traveling merchant or a letter from relatives back east. But the broader world feels distant and irrelevant when your primary concern is surviving until tomorrow. Women bear an additional burden of isolation. While men occasionally travel to town for supplies or interact with other men during communal work projects, women are typically confined to the cabin and immediate area. Their social interaction is limited to their own children and spouse, creating profound loneliness and psychological stress. Elizabeth hasn't spoken to another adult woman in over 2 months. She hasn't been further than half a mile from the cabin since October. Her world has shrunk to the dimensions of the small cabin and the immediate area around it. The psychological impact of this isolation is severe, but often unacknowledged. Children experience their own forms of isolation. They rarely interact with other children their own age. Their education consists of whatever their parents can teach them, plus perhaps some basic reading and arithmetic if the family owns any books. Formal schooling is rare and often interrupted by the demands of survival. Sarah, at 9 years old, can read simple words and do basic arithmetic. But her education has been limited by the family's lack of books, paper, and time for learning. Most of her knowledge comes from helping with adult tasks. She knows how to milk a cow, tend chickens, prepare food, and provide basic care. The children's games and entertainment are limited by their circumstances. They play with simple objects, sticks, stones, bits of cloth. They tell each other stories, sing songs their parents taught them, and create imaginary worlds to escape the harsh realities of their daily existence. But even children's play is shaped by the realities of frontier survival. Their games often involve practicing adult skills, pretending to hunt, cook, care for animals, or deal with various challenges. There's little time or energy for pure fantasy when survival requires constant attention to practical matters. As afternoon approaches, the temperature outside seems to be dropping even further. The wind has picked up, creating what frontier families called the killing wind, a combination of sub-zero temperatures and high wind speeds that can freeze exposed skin in minutes. This means venturing outside for firewood becomes even more dangerous. But the alternative is letting the fire die, which would mean serious problems for the entire family within hours. So you bundle up again. Wool underwear, flannel shirt, wool coat, hat, gloves, scarf wrapped around your face, and prepare for another battle with the elements. The wind hits you like a physical assault when you step outside. It cuts through your clothing as if it weren't there, instantly numbing any exposed skin. The snow is blowing horizontally, creating limited visibility that makes it difficult to see more than a few feet in any direction. Walking becomes treacherous. The wind pushes against you with enough force to knock you down, and the blowing snow makes it hard to see obstacles or hazards. You move slowly, carefully, following landmarks to avoid getting lost in the storm. Getting lost between your cabin and barn, a distance of maybe 50 yards, is a real possibility in these conditions. Frontier families were sometimes found close to their homes because they became disoriented in blizzards and walked in the wrong direction. You reach the woodpile behind the barn only to discover that most of the split wood is now buried under snowdrifts. Digging it out requires more time and energy, exposing you longer to the dangerous cold. Your hands are already numb despite thick gloves, and you can feel your toes becoming uncomfortable in your boots. The wood, when you finally uncover it, is wet from blown snow. Wet wood doesn't burn well. It creates more smoke than heat and requires dry kindling to catch fire at all. But it's what you have. So it's what you'll use, loading an armful of wet, heavy wood while fighting wind and blowing snow tests the limits of human endurance. The wood is awkward to carry, and your numb hands struggle to maintain a grip. The wind pushes against you with enough force to make walking difficult, and the blowing snow intermittently blinds you. The journey back to the cabin feels like it takes forever. Each step is a struggle against the wind, and you stop frequently to rest and regain your grip on the firewood. By the time you reach the cabin door, you're exhausted, damp with sweat despite the cold, and showing early signs of serious cold exposure. Inside the cabin, Elizabeth greets you with relief and concern. Relief that you made it back safely, concern about your condition. Your hands show clear signs of cold injury. They're white and waxy looking. Your lips have a bluish tinge, and you're shivering uncontrollably despite being back in the relative warmth of the cabin. Treatment for cold injuries in 1875 is basic and often ineffective. Elizabeth helps you remove your wet gloves and begins warming your hands with her own, probably the best treatment available given the knowledge of the time. The process of rewarming is quite painful, but it's necessary to prevent permanent damage. But you can't rest for long. The fire needs tending, and you can see that the wood supply inside the cabin is getting critically low. Elizabeth has been feeding the fire sparingly to make the wood last, but the cabin temperature has dropped noticeably while you are outside. The children's conditions seem to be worsening. Tommy appears more unwell. His fever seems higher, and he's developed a concerning cough. Sarah is also clearly sicker. Her cough now sounds more serious, and she's complaining of chest discomfort. Mary is starting to show signs of illness as well. In 1875, there's essentially nothing you can do for seriously ill children except keep them warm, give them fluids, and hope for recovery. There are no antibiotics, no hospitals, no pediatric specialists. Folk remedies might provide some comfort, but they're unlikely to cure serious infections. The psychological challenge of watching your children suffer while being unable to effectively help them is one of the cruelest aspects of frontier life. Parents develop a terrible familiarity with the signs of serious illness in children, the changes in breathing, the way a child becomes listless as their body fights infection. Many frontier families dealt with childhood illnesses that we would consider serious today. It was so common that communities developed support systems for families facing these challenges. But the repeated stress of childhood illness created lasting psychological impacts that affected entire families and communities. Elizabeth sits beside Tommy, trying to get him to sip warm water. The little boy seems quite unwell, his breathing labored and his awareness limited. Sarah lies on the bed, too weak to sit up. Her cough echoing through the small cabin, Mary clings to her mother. Frightened by her sibling's illness and the general atmosphere of crisis, you realize that this situation, sick children, dwindling supplies, brutal weather, and no help available, represents a convergence of frontier dangers. Families regularly face situations exactly like this one. The combination of illness, extreme weather, and isolation created challenging circumstances that tested human endurance and resourcefulness. The cabin's single room intensifies the crisis. There's no way to separate sick children from healthy ones, no quiet space for the ill to rest, no escape from the sound of constant coughing and discomfort. The psychological pressure on everyone is enormous. As darkness approaches, which happens early in winter, you face another challenge. Light in 1875 comes from candles, oil lamps, or the fireplace. All of these consume resources that you might need for other purposes. Candles are expensive and burn quickly. Lamp oil costs money you don't have. Using wood for light means less fuel for heat. Most frontier families lived by the rhythm of natural light. They woke at dawn, worked during daylight hours, and went to bed shortly after dark. Staying up late required burning precious resources that might mean the difference between comfort and serious cold. Elizabeth lights a single candle as darkness falls, placing it carefully on the wooden table where its light provides minimal illumination for the entire cabin. The flickering candlelight creates dancing shadows on the log walls, making the small space feel even more confined and claustrophobic. Dinner consists of more cornmeal mush, this time with a small piece of salt pork for flavoring. The children are too sick to eat much, which worries you deeply. They need nutrition to fight their illnesses, but they can't seem to keep much food down. The salt pork, when you examine it closely by candlelight, shows some signs of aging. There are spots that might be concerning, and the smell is stronger than usual, but it's the only meat you have, and discarding it means losing crucial calories and protein. Food safety in 1875 is largely a matter of careful observation and strong constitutions. Preservation methods aren't always reliable, so families often have to make difficult decisions about questionable food. Stomach problems are common and can be serious, especially for children and elderly people. You carefully examine the salt pork and remove any obviously problematic parts before cooking the remainder thoroughly, hoping the heat will eliminate any potential issues. It's a calculated risk. Eating questionable meat might cause stomach problems, but not eating at all will definitely weaken you in the ongoing fight for survival. The evening meal is eaten in relative silence. Everyone is too tired, too cold, and too worried to engage in much conversation. The children pick at their food. Coughing and whimpering, Elizabeth eats mechanically, her attention focused on Tommy's increasingly concerning breathing. After dinner, the evening routine begins. This consists mainly of preparing for another night of survival. The fire needs to be managed carefully, enough coals to restart easily in the morning, but not so much fuel that it burns out during the night and leaves you dangerously cold. Banking a fire is an art that frontier families mastered through necessity. Too little fuel and the fire dies, leaving you dangerously cold. Too much and you waste precious wood. The goal is to create a bed of coals that will smolder through the night, providing minimal heat but preserving enough fire to restart easily at dawn. Elizabeth heats several stones in the fireplace. These will be wrapped in cloth and placed in the beds to provide warmth during the coldest hours of the night. It's a primitive but effective way to extend body heat through the long winter night. The chamber pot gets one final emptying before bedtime. Though in this weather, it means a quick trip to dump the contents just outside the door, rather than carrying them to the proper disposal area. The contents will freeze solid within minutes, to be dealt with when weather permits. Personal hygiene consists of wiping faces and hands with a damp cloth. Full bathing is impossible in winter. It requires too much hot water, too much fuel to heat it, and creates too much risk of getting chilled. Most frontier families bathe thoroughly once a week at most, and often much less frequently in winter. Teeth are cleaned by chewing on frayed twigs or rubbing them with rough cloth. There's no toothpaste, no floss, no mouthwash. Dental hygiene is primitive, which explains why most adults have serious tooth problems by their 30s. The children are bundled into their shared bed, fully clothed except for their boots. There's no such thing as pajamas. You sleep in the same clothes you wear during the day, adding extra layers for warmth. The heated stones are tucked around their feet and bodies to help them stay warm through the night. Tommy seems to be the most concerning. His breathing is labored, and he feels quite warm to the touch. Sarah's cough keeps her awake, and the sound echoes through the small cabin. Mary tries to sleep but is kept awake by her siblings' illness and her own growing discomfort from the cold and the stress of the situation. You and Elizabeth share the other bed, but sleep is fitful and interrupted. One of you needs to tend the fire every few hours to keep it from dying completely. The children's coughing wakes you repeatedly outside. The wind howls with a sound that frontier families learn to recognize as a sign of dropping temperatures. Around midnight, you wake to find the cabin noticeably colder. The fire has burned low, and you can see your breath in the dim red glow of the remaining coals. Your first instinct is to add more wood, but you know you need to conserve fuel to last until morning. Instead, you carefully arrange a few small pieces of wood on the coals, hoping to coax a little more heat without consuming too much of your precious fuel supply. It's a delicate balance that requires experience and good judgment, skills that frontier families developed through trial and error. Elizabeth wakes as you tend the fire. Without speaking, she checks on the children. Tommy's condition seems to have worsened during the night. His fever appears higher, and his breathing sounds more labored. Sarah's cough has developed a more concerning quality. Mary seems to be developing symptoms as well. This is every frontier parent's worry. Multiple sick children during a winter storm with no medical help available. You exchange concerned glances with Elizabeth, both of you understanding the seriousness of the situation without needing to discuss it aloud. The wind outside has intensified to what sounds like a full blizzard. The cabin creaks and groans under the assault of wind and snow. Drafts of frigid air seep through gaps in the log walls. Despite your efforts to seal them with mud and cloth, you realize that this storm might last for days. Blizzards on the prairie are legendary for their duration and intensity. Families have been snowed in for weeks, slowly consuming their supplies while waiting for the weather to break. The immediate concern is fuel for the fire. You estimate maybe 8 hours worth of split wood remaining inside the cabin. The woodpile outside is buried under snow and might be inaccessible until the storm passes. If the fire dies, serious cold will threaten your family within hours in these temperatures. Elizabeth begins to gather anything combustible from around the cabin. Scraps of paper, pieces of cardboard, wooden utensils that could be spared, even some of the children's simple wooden toys, in extreme survival situations. Sentiment becomes a luxury you can't afford. You consider breaking apart some of the furniture, perhaps the extra stool, or the small shelf in the corner, but you realize you might need these items for future emergencies. Every possession in a frontier cabin serves a survival purpose, making it difficult to sacrifice anything for immediate fuel. The children's condition continues to concern you. Tommy seems quite unwell with fever, having difficulty staying alert and struggling to keep fluids down. Sarah's cough has worsened to the point where she has trouble breathing between episodes. Mary is now clearly developing symptoms and beginning to show the same type of cough. In 1875, what you're witnessing could be whooping cough, pneumonia, or severe flu. All serious concerns for children in this era. Without antibiotics or proper medical care, families could only provide comfort care and hope for recovery. Elizabeth tries various traditional remedies passed down from her mother and grandmother. She makes warm compresses from heated cloths to place on the children's chests. She prepares teas from dried herbs stored in the cabin. She encourages them to breathe steam from boiling water. These treatments provide some comfort but limited medical benefit. Around 2 in the morning, the situation becomes more critical. Tommy's breathing becomes extremely labored, and his fever spikes to alarming levels. In the modern era, this child would be rushed to a hospital emergency room. In 1875 Nebraska, you can only provide comfort and hope for improvement. Elizabeth holds Tommy while his small body fights the illness. The fever causes him significant distress before he eventually settles into an exhausted sleep. You both understand that you're watching your son face a serious health challenge that's beyond your ability to treat effectively. Sarah's condition has also worsened significantly. Her cough now brings up concerning amounts of fluid, and she complains of severe chest pain. She struggles to breathe, taking rapid, shallow breaths that suggest her respiratory system is seriously affected. Mary, the previously healthiest child, develops the characteristic sound when she coughs, suggesting that the illness is spreading through the family. The disease appears to be highly contagious, and it's clear that all three children have been affected. The psychological challenge of this situation is almost overwhelming. You and Elizabeth take turns providing comfort to the sick children, trying to help them feel better while knowing there's essentially nothing you can do to cure their illness. The feeling of helplessness is profound. Outside, the storm continues with unabated fury. Snow piles higher against the cabin walls, and the wind creates an almost constant howling that serves as an ominous soundtrack to the family's medical crisis. You're completely isolated, even if help existed. There would be no way to reach it in these conditions. The fire continues to burn low despite your efforts to conserve fuel. You're faced with a difficult choice. Use more wood to keep the cabin warm enough for the sick children, or conserve fuel and risk everyone getting dangerously cold.
Either decision could have serious consequences.
You decide to sacrifice one of the wooden stools. Breaking it apart to feed the fire, the extra heat provides temporary relief. But you know this is a short-term solution. At this rate, you'll run out of combustible materials within the next few hours, around 4 in the morning. Tommy's breathing becomes so concerning that you fear he might not recover. Elizabeth cradles the little boy against her chest, singing softly to him as his breathing becomes increasingly irregular. The scene would be heartbreaking under any circumstances, but in the context of frontier isolation and helplessness, it's almost unbearable. Sarah has stopped coughing frequently, which initially seems like an improvement until you realize she stopped because she lacks the strength to cough effectively. She lies motionless except for rapid, shallow breathing, her eyes unfocused and glassy. Mary continues to develop symptoms, her small body fighting the illness with fever and the characteristic cough that suggests the disease is progressing rapidly through her respiratory system. The cabin temperature has dropped noticeably despite your efforts to maintain the fire. Ice is forming on the inside of the single window, and you can see your breath clearly in the dim firelight. The combination of illness and cold is creating a dangerous situation for everyone. Elizabeth begins to display signs of illness as well. She's developed a cough and mentions feeling feverish. As the primary caregiver for the children, she's been most exposed to their respiratory infections if she becomes seriously ill. The family's chances of managing this crisis drop significantly. You feel the onset of symptoms yourself: scratchy throat, body aches, and the beginning of a cough. In your weakened state from poor nutrition, hard physical labor, and constant stress, your body has little resistance to infectious disease. This scenario, an entire family falling ill during a severe winter storm, represents one of the most common ways frontier families faced serious challenges. Disease, weather, and isolation combined to create situations where survival became extremely difficult despite people's best efforts. As gray dawnlight filters through the ice-covered window, the situation inside the cabin has become quite serious. Tommy has been in and out of consciousness for several hours, his breathing shallow and concerning. Sarah lies motionless, her lips showing signs of oxygen deprivation. Mary's cough has intensified throughout the night. The fire has burned down to barely glowing coals, and the cabin temperature has dropped to perhaps 20 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to threaten everyone's health even if they weren't already ill. Your fuel supply is completely exhausted except for emergency items you've been saving as a last resort. Elizabeth is now clearly ill with the same respiratory infection affecting the children. Her cough has developed overnight, and she's showing signs of fever as she weakens. Her ability to care for the sick children diminishes, creating a challenging spiral of family health. You face a difficult decision: venture out into the continuing blizzard to search for more fuel, knowing you might face serious exposure or become lost in the storm, or stay inside and risk letting your family get dangerously cold as the fire dies completely. The storm outside shows no signs of abating. Through the small window, you can see that snow has drifted up to the windowsill, meaning accumulations of at least 4 feet. The wind continues to howl, creating whiteout conditions that make navigation extremely hazardous. But the alternative to going outside is certain problems for everyone. Without fuel for the fire, dangerous cold will threaten your already weakened family within hours. Despite the enormous risks, you begin preparing for what might be a final, Desperate search for anything burnable, you bundle up in every piece of clothing you can find. Multiple layers of wool, wrapped blankets, cloth tied around your face to protect against frostbite. You take a rope from your supplies and tie one end around your waist, planning to secure the other end to the cabin so you can find your way back, even if you become disoriented in the storm. Elizabeth understands what you're attempting and the risks involved. If something happens to you outside, she and the children will certainly face serious problems. But if you don't try, they'll face difficulties anyway. It's a calculated risk with serious potential outcomes either way, before leaving. You feed the remaining coals with splinters from a broken wooden box, coaxing just enough flame to provide minimal heat for a few more minutes. It's a small fire, but it's all you can offer your family before venturing into the storm. The moment you open the cabin door, the wind and cold hit you with physical force. The temperature is probably 30 below zero, and the wind speed makes it feel even colder. Snow immediately fills the doorway, blown by wind so strong it threatens to knock you down. You step out into a world transformed by the blizzard. Snow drifts reach above your waist in some places, and the familiar landscape has become alien and dangerous. The barn, usually visible from the cabin door, has disappeared in the whiteout conditions created by blowing snow. Navigation becomes a matter of survival. You secure the rope to the cabin door handle and begin moving slowly in the direction where you remember the barn to be located. Each step requires tremendous effort as you wade through snow that sometimes reaches your chest. The cold is immediately life-threatening. Within minutes, any exposed skin begins to freeze. Your lungs burn with each breath of the supercooled air. Ice forms around your mouth and nose, making breathing increasingly difficult. You reach the barn more by luck than navigation, stumbling into its wall after what feels like hours but was probably only 15 minutes. The structure provides some shelter from the wind, allowing you to assess your situation and plan your search for fuel. Inside the barn, the animals are in serious condition. The horses stand huddled together, their breath creating clouds of vapor in the frigid air.
Ice has formed around their nostrils and eyes.
The cow has stopped producing milk entirely, her body conserving energy for basic survival. Several of the chickens have died during the night. Their small bodies lie still in the corner where they tried to shelter together. The survivors barely move, conserving what little energy they have left. You realize that the animals probably won't survive much longer without warmer shelter and more food. But your immediate concern is finding fuel for the cabin fire. You begin searching for anything that will burn: old straw, wooden tools, even considering breaking apart some of the barn structure itself. Behind the barn, you locate the buried woodpile and begin the exhausting process of digging through snowdrifts to reach the split logs underneath. The snow is heavy and packed by wind, requiring enormous effort to move. Your shovel quickly becomes too heavy to lift as ice accumulates on the blade. Each piece of wood you uncover is wet from melted snow and will be difficult to burn. Wet wood produces more smoke than heat and requires dry kindling to ignite. Kindling you don't have. But it's fuel, and fuel means the possibility of warmth. Loading your arms with wet, heavy wood while fighting wind and blinding snow tests the absolute limits of human endurance. The weight of the wood combined with the deep snow makes each step back toward the cabin a monumental effort. Halfway back to the cabin, you realize you're in serious trouble. The combination of extreme cold, physical exertion, and wet clothes has triggered the early stages of hypothermia. Your thinking becomes confused, your movements uncoordinated, and you begin to feel deceptively warm. A dangerous sign that your body is beginning to shut down. The rope tied around your waist becomes your lifeline. Following it hand over hand through the blowing snow, you navigate back to the cabin more by touch than sight. By the time you reach the door, you're showing advanced signs of hypothermia and cold exposure. Elizabeth helps you inside, alarmed by your condition. Your hands show signs of serious cold injury. Your lips are blue and you're shivering uncontrollably. She begins the process of gradually warming you while trying to coax life back into the dying fire. The wet wood is almost impossible to ignite with the few remaining coals. Elizabeth uses precious paper and fabric scraps as kindling, desperately trying to create enough heat to dry and ignite the snow-soaked logs. It takes nearly an hour of careful work to achieve even a small, smoky fire. During this time, the children's conditions have reached critical points. Tommy's breathing has become so shallow that Elizabeth periodically checks to ensure he's still breathing. His small body seems to be losing its fight against the infection that has overwhelmed his immune system. As the morning progresses, you're forced to confront the mathematical realities of your situation. The small amount of wet wood you retrieved will last perhaps 6 hours. The storm shows no signs of stopping. The children are seriously ill. Elizabeth is getting sicker. You're showing signs of serious illness yourself, even if the weather improved immediately. You'd face enormous challenges. The sick children couldn't travel. The nearest medical help is days away by horseback. Assuming the horses survive the current conditions. The food supplies are nearly exhausted. Most of the animals appear to be dying. This is how frontier families face their greatest challenges. Not in dramatic incidents, but in slow-motion disasters where multiple problems combine to create seemingly impossible situations. Disease, weather, isolation, and limited resources created crisis situations that tested human endurance and resourcefulness to their absolute limits. By mid-morning, reality forces you to think in terms of priorities, a concept that frontier families understood instinctively. With limited resources and multiple crises, you must decide which problems to address first and which family members have the best chance of recovery. Tommy appears to be facing the most serious health challenge. His breathing is extremely shallow, and Elizabeth must lean close to detect any movement of his chest. His fever has remained dangerously high for over 12 hours, and he hasn't responded to any attempts to give him water or food. Sarah's condition has stabilized at a critically concerning level. She's unconscious but breathing, her body fighting an infection that could prove fatal but might not be. In the modern era, she'd require intensive medical intervention. In 1875, her survival depends on factors beyond anyone's control. Mary's illness continues to worsen, but she remains conscious and able to take small amounts of fluid. Of the 3 children, she seems to have the best chance of recovery. Though her condition remains serious, Elizabeth's illness is progressing rapidly. Her cough now produces bloody sputum, and she's developed a high fever as the primary caregiver. Her illness threatens everyone's survival if she becomes unable to function. Your chances of keeping the family alive drop dramatically. Your own symptoms are mild but developing. You feel the scratchy throat and body aches that suggest the beginning of the same respiratory infection. Given your weakened state from poor nutrition and extreme physical stress, the disease will probably progress quickly once it takes hold. The fuel situation remains critical. The wet wood burns poorly and produces mostly smoke at the current rate of consumption. You have perhaps 4 hours of fuel remaining after that. The cabin temperature will drop below freezing within an hour, and hypothermia will threaten everyone. Food supplies are nearly exhausted. You have perhaps 2 days' worth of cornmeal remaining, and the salt pork is clearly spoiled beyond safe consumption. The children are too sick to eat solid food anyway, but the adults need nutrition to maintain their strength for fighting illness and caring for the family. Water presents its own challenges. The well outside is probably frozen solid, making it inaccessible during the storm. You've been melting snow for water, but this requires precious fuel and produces water that tastes unpleasant and may contain contaminants. The storm continues with undiminished intensity. Snow accumulations have reached levels that make travel impossible even in good weather. The wind creates drifts that could bury a person completely, even if medical help existed somewhere nearby. Reaching it would be impossible in current conditions. The animals in the barn are dying. Without adequate shelter, food, and water, they can't survive extended exposure to these extreme conditions. Their deaths would eliminate your transportation, milk supply, and food sources, making long-term survival impossible, even if the family recovers from their current illnesses. You begin to understand why frontier mortality rates were so high. It wasn't just the dramatic deaths from accidents or violence. It was situations exactly like this one. The convergence of multiple survival challenges that created impossible circumstances for ordinary families. The psychological pressure of making life and death decisions with inadequate information and limited resources is enormous. Every choice carries potentially serious consequences. Use more fuel to keep the cabin warm, and you exhaust your supply faster. Conserve fuel, and the sick children might suffer from dangerous cold. Venture outside to search for more fuel, and you might face serious exposure. Stay inside, and watch your family get dangerously cold as the fire dies. feed the questionable salt pork to your family, and risk food poisoning, discard it, and lose crucial calories and nutrition. These weren't abstract philosophical dilemmas. They were daily realities for frontier families. Parents regularly face choices where any decision might result in serious consequences for their children. The psychological burden of such decisions affected entire generations. Elizabeth makes the decision to sacrifice her own health for the children. She gives up her share of the remaining food, uses her body heat to warm the sickest children, and continues nursing activities despite her own high fever and illness. This maternal sacrifice was common on the frontier. Women regularly risked their health protecting their children, often contracting diseases while caring for sick family members. The concept of maternal self-sacrifice wasn't romanticized idealism. It was practical reality in survival situations. Around noon, as you contemplate the impossible decisions ahead, something begins to shift in the family's condition. Tommy's breathing, while still labored, seems to stabilize slightly. His fever appears to have peaked and might be beginning to decrease. Sarah shows the first signs of consciousness in many hours, while still extremely weak. She opens her eyes and seems to recognize her surroundings. She's able to take small sips of water when Elizabeth helps her. Mary's condition has actually improved noticeably. Her fever has broken, and while she still has a cough, it's much less severe than at its worst. She's able to sit up for short periods and even helps with simple tasks. Elizabeth's illness seems to have plateaued rather than worsened. She's clearly sick, but still functional, and her fever appears to be stabilizing rather than climbing higher. Your own symptoms remain mild. You're developing the same respiratory infection, but at a much slower pace than the rest of the family. This gives you hope that perhaps the worst of the crisis has passed. The improvement in the family's health coincides with a subtle but significant change in the weather. The wind has decreased noticeably, and while snow is still falling, it's no longer the horizontal, blinding assault of the previous days through the cabin window. You can see actual visibility for the first time in days. The storm is still active, but the whiteout conditions have given way to heavy but manageable snowfall. This combination of improving health and slightly better weather creates the first realistic possibility of seeking outside help. The snow is still deep and the temperature still dangerous, but for the first time in days, travel might be possible for someone in reasonable physical condition. You spend the afternoon assessing your options and making plans. The nearest neighbors, the Johnson family, live approximately 3 miles to the northeast, in good conditions. This would be a manageable walk for a healthy adult. In current conditions, with deep snow and sub-zero temperatures, it would be extremely challenging but possibly survivable. The decision about whether to attempt the journey is complicated by your family's continuing need for care. Elizabeth is ill but functional. Sarah is conscious but extremely weak. Mary has improved significantly but is still recovering from serious illness and is only 7 years old. Leaving them alone would mean abandoning people who still need care in a cabin with limited fuel and no guarantee that you'll successfully reach help or return quickly enough to matter. Taking them with you would mean exposing sick and weakened people to life-threatening conditions during a dangerous journey. The mathematical realities are stark. Your family probably has enough fuel to survive another 24-36 hours if you're very careful with consumption. Food will last perhaps 2 more days, though the sick family members aren't eating much anyway. Water is available by melting snow, though this requires precious fuel. If you attempt the journey to the Johnson farm, and everything goes perfectly, you might be able to bring help back within 12-18 hours. If anything goes wrong, if you get lost, injured, or overcome by exposure, your family will be left to face serious challenges alone in the cabin. But the alternative is staying together and hoping that the weather improves enough for rescue to find you, or that your family recovers enough to travel together. Given your isolation and the fact that no one knows about your crisis, rescue seems unlikely unless you create it yourself. After agonizing consideration throughout the afternoon, you make the decision to attempt the journey alone. The risk of leaving your family is enormous, but the risk of staying seems even greater. At least this way. There's a chance of bringing back help before it's too late. You spend the early evening preparing for the journey and explaining your plan to Mary, who has become mature beyond her years during this crisis. She understands that she'll need to tend the fire, give water to her mother and sister, and keep everyone as warm as possible until you return. The responsibility you're placing on a 7-year-old child would be considered inappropriate by any modern standard. But frontier children regularly shouldered adult responsibilities because family survival depended on everyone contributing their maximum capability. You prepare a pack with minimal supplies, some remaining food, materials for starting a fire if necessary, and the tools you might need for emergency shelter. Every ounce of weight will matter during the difficult journey ahead. Elizabeth remains ill but stable before leaving. You position her as close to the fire as safely possible and wrap her in every available blanket. Sarah, while awake, is still too weak to do much more than take sips of water. You position her where Mary can easily care for her. Mary receives careful instructions about tending the fire, caring for her family members, and what to do if anyone's condition changes dramatically. The little girl listens seriously, understanding that she's become the temporary head of the household. Tommy, while still quite sick, has stabilized enough that you feel he's not in immediate danger. His breathing is more regular, and his fever has decreased to levels that, while still concerning, aren't immediately life-threatening. You set out just before dawn, hoping to reach the Johnson farm and return with help as quickly as possible. The journey begins with cautious optimism. The storm has continued to diminish, and visibility has improved to perhaps 50 yards in most directions. The snow depth averages 3 to 4 feet across most terrain, with drifts considerably deeper in some areas. Walking requires enormous effort as you break trail through snow that sometimes reaches your chest. Progress is measured in hundreds of yards per hour rather than miles. Your weakened condition from illness becomes apparent immediately. The respiratory infection has reduced your lung capacity and stamina significantly. Simple exertion leaves you breathing hard and fighting coughing fits that waste precious energy and time. The cold is brutal, but manageable with proper clothing and constant movement. The temperature is probably around 20 below zero. Dangerous but not immediately life-threatening for someone properly dressed and moving steadily. After the first mile, it becomes clear that your pace is far too slow to make good time. The sun is already climbing in the winter sky, and you've covered perhaps 1/3 of the distance needed. But turning back now would mean accepting that your family will probably not survive without outside help. You push forward, knowing that you're committed to reaching help regardless of how long it takes or what personal risks you face. The decision to continue is both practical and emotional. There's simply no acceptable alternative. The landscape around you has been transformed by the storm into an alien environment. Familiar landmarks are buried or distorted by snow. Navigation becomes a matter of following general compass directions and hoping that you don't become seriously lost. As the morning progresses, fatigue and cold begin to take their toll. Your pace slows dramatically, and you're forced to stop frequently to rest and fight off the effects of cold and exhaustion. The combination of illness, physical exertion, and extreme cold pushes your body toward its limits. But the image of your family huddled around a dying fire keeps you moving forward. Mary trying to care for her unconscious sister and sick mother. Elizabeth fighting illness while still trying to help her children. Tommy struggling to recover from a serious respiratory infection. Sarah clinging to consciousness and recovery. The thought of them facing this crisis alone while you give up is unacceptable. Every step forward is a conscious decision to continue living. To keep fighting for your family's survival despite the physical and mental exhaustion that threatens to overwhelm you. Around midday, you finally see smoke rising in the distance, the Johnson farm's chimney. The sight provides enormous psychological relief and renewed energy for the final push toward help. After more than 6 hours of desperate travel, salvation is finally within reach. The Johnsons are shocked when you arrive at their door. Exhausted from the journey but alive, Mrs. Johnson immediately takes charge of warming you and treating your symptoms while Mr. Johnson organizes a rescue party for your family. The rescue expedition faces the same dangerous conditions you've just survived, but with multiple people, better supplies, and knowledge of exactly where to go, Mr. Johnson and his 2 oldest sons prepare sleds, warm blankets, and emergency supplies for the journey back to your cabin. The return journey takes most of the day through the deep snow, but when the rescue party arrives at your cabin, they find Mary still dutifully tending the fire and caring for her family members. The 7-year-old has kept everyone alive through some of the most critical hours of the crisis. Elizabeth is ill but stable, her breathing more regular than when you left. Sarah has continued to improve slowly, and is conscious enough to understand that help has arrived. Tommy has stabilized at a still concerning but no longer critical level. Mary, despite her exhaustion and the enormous responsibility placed on her young shoulders, has proven remarkably capable of handling adult duties. The rescue party is amazed to find that she managed to keep the fire going, provide water to the sick family members, and maintain the household during your absence. The Johnson family provides immediate care, warm blankets, hot food, and the basic medical attention available in 1875 rural America. Mrs. Johnson, experienced in frontier medical care, begins the process of nursing your family back to health. Recovery takes weeks. Elizabeth's illness was severe enough to require extended bed rest and careful monitoring. Sarah's respiratory infection left her weakened for months, and she remains more susceptible to illness for years afterward. Tommy's recovery is slow but steady, and he eventually regains his full health. Mary shows remarkable psychological resilience. While the experience certainly affects her, she carries herself with a maturity and capability that serves her well throughout her life. The responsibility she shouldered during the crisis becomes a source of strength and confidence. Your own recovery is complicated by the combination of illness and severe exposure during the rescue journey. The cold injuries to your hands and feet cause some permanent numbness in certain areas, and your respiratory system takes months to fully recover from the infection. When you're finally able to return to assess your homestead in the spring, the damage is extensive. The cabin, stripped of interior walls for fuel, is uninhabitable. The roof has partially collapsed under snow load, and the structure will need to be completely rebuilt. All of your animals died during the crisis, the horses, cow, and chickens that represented your family's economic foundation and survival resources. The loss of livestock means starting over completely, without transportation, milk production, or egg supply. Your stored food supplies were consumed or spoiled during the emergency.
The root cellar, while intact, is nearly empty.
The tools and equipment you've accumulated over years of frontier life were damaged by cold or scattered by desperate survival efforts. The total loss represents more than just property. It's the destruction of everything you've worked to build during your time on the frontier. The investment of labor, time, and hope that went into establishing your homestead has been wiped out by one catastrophic winter storm. But the frontier community rallies to help your family recover. This mutual aid network is essential for survival in conditions where individual families can't withstand major disasters alone. Neighbors provide temporary shelter, food, clothing, and eventually assistance in rebuilding. The Johnsons house your family for the remainder of the winter, sharing their limited resources and space. Other neighbors contribute what they can: spare clothing, preserved food, tools, and labor for reconstruction efforts that will begin in spring. This community support system isn't based on charity or pity. It's practical insurance. Every family understands that they could face similar disasters and will need similar help when their turn comes. The mutual aid that saves your family today could save any of them tomorrow. As spring arrives and you begin to rebuild your lives, you're forced to reconsider your approach to frontier survival. The experience has taught valuable lessons about preparation, resource management, and the importance of community connections during emergencies. Your new cabin is built with better insulation and multiple heat sources. You install a larger fireplace with improved chimney design, create storage areas for larger fuel supplies, and include a small attached shelter for animals that can be accessed without going outside. Food storage becomes a higher priority. You preserve more food during harvest seasons, diversify your preservation methods, and maintain larger reserves of non-perishable items. The memory of facing starvation drives more careful planning for extended emergencies. Your family's experience, while dramatic, was not unusual for 1875 America. Historians estimate that mortality rates in frontier communities were dramatically higher than in more established areas, with entire families regularly lost to combinations of disease, weather, and isolation. Winter was the deadliest season for frontier families. The combination of extreme cold, limited food supplies, poor heating systems, and isolation from medical help created perfect conditions for family disasters. Many families simply disappeared during harsh winters, their fates unknown until their bodies were discovered in spring. Childhood mortality was particularly high. Diseases that are easily treatable today, whooping cough, diphtheria, pneumonia, scarlet fever, regularly threatened frontier children. Families typically had many children, partly because they expected to face serious childhood illnesses. Women faced additional risks from pregnancy and childbirth complications. Without access to medical care, many women died giving birth or from post-delivery infections. The demands of caring for large families in primitive conditions also wore down women's health more rapidly than men's. Men faced dangers from accidents, exposure, and various hazards. Farm work with primitive equipment caused frequent injuries that could become serious without proper medical treatment. Getting lost in storms, encounters with wild animals, and conflicts with other settlers also claimed many lives. The psychological toll of frontier life was enormous, but rarely discussed in historical accounts. The constant stress of survival, frequent loss of family members, and isolation from social support created mental health problems that were neither understood nor treated effectively. Families like yours that survived major crises were considered fortunate, even when they lost some members. Complete family survival through events like the blizzard you experienced was rare enough to be noteworthy in community records. The mutual aid that helped your family recover was essential for frontier community survival. Families who helped others in crisis could expect similar help when they faced their own disasters. This social insurance system was the only safety net available in frontier conditions. Your family's story becomes part of local community memory, shared as a cautionary tale about frontier dangers and an example of survival through mutual support. These stories served educational purposes, teaching other families about potential dangers and successful survival strategies. The psychological effects of your trauma influence family dynamics for years. You develop heightened sensitivity to weather changes, maintain larger emergency supplies than strictly necessary, and show increased anxiety about family health issues. Sarah grows up with a deep appreciation for basic comforts and strong motivation to help others in crisis. Her near-death experience creates empathy for suffering and determination to contribute to community welfare. Mary develops exceptional practical skills and emotional resilience. The responsibility she shouldered during the crisis at age 7 creates unusual maturity and capability that serves her well throughout frontier life. Tommy, while he recovers physically, carries subtle effects of his serious illness throughout childhood. He develops a cautious approach to health and a deep appreciation for medical care when it becomes available. Your remarriage within a few years brings new family dynamics but also additional security. Your new wife contributes her own survival knowledge and experience, creating a stronger family unit better equipped to handle future emergencies. The technological limitations of 1875 created many of the survival challenges your family faced. Understanding these constraints helps explain why situations that would be minor inconveniences today were life-threatening emergencies on the frontier. Heating technology was primitive and inefficient. Fireplaces and wood stoves provided localized heat, but couldn't warm entire buildings effectively. Fuel consumption was enormous and heat distribution was poor, creating the constant fuel shortages that threatened your family. Building construction used techniques that prioritized speed and available materials over energy efficiency or comfort. Single-wall log cabins provided minimal insulation, and construction standards often created buildings that were difficult to heat adequately. Food preservation methods were limited to salting, smoking, drying, and root cellars. These techniques worked but were unreliable, and food spoilage was common. Families regularly faced the choice between eating questionable food or going hungry. Transportation relied on animal power and was severely limited by weather conditions. The isolation that nearly killed your family would have been easily overcome with modern transportation and communication systems. Medical knowledge was limited and often counterproductive. Many common treatments actually made patients worse, and the lack of understanding about infection control and disease transmission contributed to high mortality rates. Communication systems were primitive and unreliable. Families could be isolated for months without any contact with the outside world, making it impossible to summon help during emergencies or even to inform others about serious problems. Water systems depended on wells and springs that often froze or became contaminated. The lack of reliable clean water contributed to disease outbreaks and made basic hygiene extremely difficult during winter months. Lighting depended on candles, oil lamps, and fireplaces, all of which consumed precious resources and created fire hazards. Families often lived in darkness to conserve materials needed for heat and cooking. Tool technology was basic, but required significant skill to use effectively. Fire building, food preparation, And construction tasks that are simple with modern tools required considerable expertise and physical strength with 1875 equipment. Weather prediction was based on folk wisdom and basic observation. Families had no advance warning of severe storms and couldn't plan effectively for extended bad weather periods. As this story of survival and hardship draws to a close, let your mind drift away from the harsh realities of 1875 and back to the comfort and safety of your present moment. Feel the softness of your mattress, the warmth of your blankets, the security of your shelter. The contrast between that frontier family's desperate struggle and your current comfort isn't meant to make you feel guilty about your advantages. Instead, let it create a sense of gratitude for the safety and security that you might normally take for granted. Your warm bed represents the accumulated progress of 150 years of human development. The building technologies, heating systems, medical knowledge, and social support networks that protect you tonight are the legacy of countless people who work to create better conditions for future generations. The family in this story, despite their suffering, contributed to that progress. Their struggles taught lessons that helped others survive. Their survival techniques were passed down through generations. Their community-building efforts created the foundations for more secure settlements. Even their challenges provided valuable information. Other families learned from their experiences, prepared better for similar difficulties, and developed improved survival strategies that saved lives in future crises. The children who survived, Sarah, Mary, and Tommy, grew up to become resilient adults who contributed to their communities and raised families of their own. Their experiences with hardship made them compassionate helpers during others' crises and wise advisors about survival techniques. Your comfortable sleep tonight is possible partly because people like this frontier family endured hardships that drove human innovation and social development. The heating systems, medical knowledge, emergency services, and social support networks that protect you evolved from humanity's struggle against the same forces that nearly destroyed this frontier family. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you appreciate the safety that surrounds you. The walls that shelter you are strong and well insulated. The heat that keeps you warm is reliable and easily controlled. The food in your kitchen will be fresh and safe tomorrow. The medical care you might need is available and effective. Your sleep will be uninterrupted by the need to tend fires or care for desperately ill family members. You won't wake to sub-zero temperatures or the sound of blizzard winds threatening your survival. Your dreams won't be haunted by calculations about whether your resources will last until spring. Instead, let your mind drift gently toward peaceful rest, knowing that you're safe, warm, and protected. The struggles of 1875 are history now, important to remember and learn from, but distant from your current reality. Feel your body relaxing completely into your comfortable bed, your muscles, which haven't been strained by survival labor or chilled by extreme cold, can rest completely. Your breathing, which doesn't have to work against smoke-filled air or the stress of constant danger, can find its natural, peaceful rhythm. Your mind, which doesn't need to make life or death decisions or worry about family survival, can let go of conscious control and drift into the restorative state of sleep. The stories of the past have been told. The lessons have been shared, and now it's time for rest. The gentle sounds of your modern environment, the quiet hum of heating systems, the distant sound of traffic, the normal settling sounds of a secure building, create a peaceful background that confirms your safety and comfort. As you sink deeper into relaxation, remember that your peaceful sleep honors the struggles of those who came before. By living safely and comfortably, you fulfill their hopes for future generations. By appreciating your advantages, you validate their sacrifices. Let the story of survival fade into the background of your consciousness as your immediate comfort takes precedence. The warm bed, the soft pillow, the secure walls, the controlled temperature, these become your entire world as sleep approaches. Your breathing becomes slower and deeper, matching the natural rhythms that have always guided human rest. Your heartbeat settles into the steady pattern that sustains life, while your conscious mind releases control to your body's innate wisdom. The images from 1875, the small cabin, the struggling family, the harsh winter, transform into abstract memories that drift away like snowflakes in a gentle breeze. What remains is the warmth, the safety, and the comfort that surrounds you now. Feel yourself sinking deeper into your mattress as if it's embracing and supporting your entire body. The weight of blankets creates a cocoon of warmth that makes the outside world irrelevant. Nothing exists except your immediate comfort and the approaching peace of sleep. Your eyelids grow heavy with the pleasant tiredness that comes after a long day. There's no urgency, no danger, no crisis that requires your attention. Everything you need for a peaceful night's rest is already here with you. The transition from waking to sleeping becomes as gentle as a sunset, with consciousness gradually fading into the peaceful darkness of restorative rest. Your body knows how to sleep, and your mind is ready to let it happen naturally. Let the final thoughts of the day drift away like leaves on a gentle stream. The worries, plans, and concerns that filled your waking hours can wait until tomorrow. Tonight is for rest, for peace, for the deep sleep that restores and refreshes. Your breathing slows to the rhythm of deep sleep. Your muscles relax completely, and your mind releases its hold on conscious thought. The story has ended. The lessons have been learned. And now there is only the quiet comfort of safe, warm, peaceful sleep. The contrast between 1875 and today fades into irrelevance as sleep takes over. What matters now is not the harsh past or the uncertain future, but the present moment of perfect comfort and security. You are safe, you are warm, you are ready for the deepest, most peaceful sleep, and so you drift off into dreams of warmth and safety, carrying with you a deeper appreciation for the simple comfort of being alive and secure in the modern world. The struggles of the past have given way to the peace of the present, and sleep comes easily and naturally, sweet dreams. And may your rest be as peaceful as the frontier family's struggles were difficult. You have earned your comfort through the simple fortune of being born into better times, and you can sleep peacefully knowing that human progress has made your safety possible. The story is complete, the night is peaceful, and sleep awaits with gentle arms to carry you into the restful darkness where all stories end and all dreams begin. The fire of survival that burned so desperately in that 1875 cabin has transformed into the warm glow of your modern comfort. And all is well. Rest now, knowing that you are safe, protected, and cared for in ways that frontier families could only dream of. The long journey from their harsh world to your comfortable one is complete, and you are the beneficiary of generations of human progress and hope. Sleep well and wake refreshed, with a new appreciation for the simple miracle of being warm, safe, and alive in the modern world.